Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage your 2018 SATE co-chairs, Bettina Buckley and John Paul Gertz.
Good morning. Great to see all of you again. Thank you, SeaWorld, for what was an unbelievable party. Wouldn't you agree last night?
Welcome back. I'm assuming we're all a little tired this morning.
Well, hopefully you're ready for day 2. And we've got some phenomenal speakers planned for you. Just like yesterday, we've put together a diverse array of speakers that will offer you plenty of opportunities to see how unique our key pillars of storytelling, architecture, technology work together to create some really captivating experiences.
And our goal, like yesterday, was to illuminate new ideas that you may not have explored.
We wanted to spark your curiosity, so get ready to tackle the next big project that will inspire you in a whole new way. Hopefully that's the goal when you walk out of here today. Now sponsoring our second pillar of SATE, let's welcome our architecture sponsor, Lisa Thornburn from Thornburn Associates.
Good morning. Wasn't yesterday absolutely fantastic? I especially liked the session with our new TA masters. What an absolutely talented group of people. At Thornburn Associates, we work behind the scenes to help create compelling experiences through the effective use and design of acoustics, lighting, and technology systems. These components contribute to the authentic placemaking, which is key to attraction design. Every story has a setting, and in our industry, every setting has its own story. Combined with storytelling and technology, architecture can elevate experiences, transporting us to another time and place. It can evoke emotions and impart meaning to special memories. This brings us to our next panel, which Bettina will introduce.
Thank you. So why study the ocean? Why use a game for a story about the ocean or about an animal or on history or an art? Why bother sharing? How can we get the audience to participate? How do we make it fun? I can't think of anyone more passionate or with more expertise on making the real relevant and giving it meaning than our leader and our mixologist for this morning's opening segment, Scott Gass. With real life as a starting point, how do we incite wonder in the lives of our guests? Scott has put together a really distinguished team on the topic of how do we consider points along the journey from scientific discovery to personal connection with the wild. In a world where more and more people are moved away from nature, how will we hear, and we will hear from the voices that have helped to powerfully bring the public into a closer relationship with the wild and creating meaning through introducing wonder. It's my pleasure to introduce Scott Gass.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing? Oh, that was weak. I'm going to try one more time. Morning, everybody. How we doing? Hey, that was pretty good. That was good. I mean, particularly after two nights. Thank you. Thank you. A positive heckler. That's nice. So as Bettina was saying, we're here today to talk to you a little bit about how we work really hard to get folks into a place where they can understand the world that they're a part of in a better, more meaningful, more personal way. And fortunately for you all today, I have a group of absolutely supreme panelists who will be each individually sharing some thoughts with you. And then we will be circling up as an overall group to dialogue back and forth and then close with a few questions from the audience. But these guys are awesome. You will see that here in just a second. and then you have to put up with me a little bit in between as I'm introducing them. Which leads me to my first introduction. Now, for those of you who are playing at home, reading along in your guides, I should point out that this handsome gentleman here immediately to my left is not Bill Lang. That's the gentleman in your guide. And for those of you who are sort of looking at that and going, oh man, that stinks, because I wanted to really hear from one of the guys that discovered the Titanic. I know, he's not here. As it turns out, Dave is also a guy that discovered the Titanic. Because you can just pick those sort of people up all over the place. They're everywhere. But he's been very kind to us. As it turns out, Bill is, I think, stuck on the Titanic. Well, above the Titanic. That's important. That's an important differentiation. And Dave has stepped in his place, and you couldn't have a better stunt double than this. So Dave Gallo is both an oceanographer and an explorer. For nearly 30 years, he was the director of special projects at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. What an awesome title, Special Projects, I love it. He is a TED All-Star speaker, eight TED Talks, many TEDx Talks. He's been on the TED stage a lot. No red carpet here, but yeah. He co-led the first mapping expedition of the RMS Titanic. He also co-led the expedition to locate and map the wreckage of Air France 447. He is a part of James Cameron's Deep Ocean Task Force. He's on the X Prize Advisory Board. He was the 2014 recipient of the Explorers Club Lowell Thomas Medal. And there's so much more that if I just said it all, and this is the same for all three of these panelists, we would use up our entire time. So I will stop there and hand the mic over to the distinguished Dr. Dave Gallo.
So to speak. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Now I know what the creatures at the bottom of the sea look like, how feel when the light's blasting at them. Let's roll it right off the top.
You got it, Dave.
Maybe let's not. So Marcel Proust said that the true voyage of discovery is not so much in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. And in that way, technology has given us new eyes. First of all, we looked at outer space, and then we think about the deep. Deep's a little bit tougher than looking just up into space because we have the water. And in the past, the images from the deep were always sort of fuzzy and a little bit blue the deeper you went. And now we can go even into the midwater region and capture the beautiful animals that live there. At the bottom of the ocean, we find these things. It looks like hot water coming out of the sea, hot smoke coming out of the sea. It's actually very hot water, very poisonous water, where we thought nothing could survive. And instead we find thriving communities of life living there. And again, almost every dive there's something surprising, sometimes startling, and in some cases revolutionary. That was one of these revolutionary moments where we found life, thriving life where we never expected it. The bottom of the ocean, most of the volcanoes on Earth are at the bottom of the ocean. And again, with technology, we're getting enough information that the public can just appreciate what's going on. We don't have to explain everything. We can say to you, what do you get out of this image? Some of the animals look like flowers. This is an underwater lake. We're passing over the seashore of a deep underwater lake. The lake is full of things like methane and hydrogen sulfide. And there are, initially the biologists said, well, nothing can live inside that water. We said that's true, except for all the animals we see swimming down there. But you might wonder, how can you do that? Well, the water is supersaline, so it sits lower. I still haven't figured out why it's so crisp like this. But you can see there are waves. If you splash it with the arm of the submarine, you actually get waves across the water. Those are mussels around the seashore or lake shore. Some of these lakes can be a mile long and hundreds of feet deep. And many of the things have just been discovered. So we're still learning about the stories they tell us. Even in shallow water, at diver depth, these new tools, the cameras, and how to use the cameras, how to use the technology, has turned out to be very important for us. not just for the scientists that are studying these animals and these environments, but also for the public to see what we're looking at. So here's a cuttlefish, and again, you know, it's something like that image of a cuttlefish burying in the sand. It's hard to believe if you don't see it for yourself. Titanic, what a story! But it's a great story to tell, but it'd be very difficult to tell if you didn't have the image of Titanic. We're also putting things in context. We start out with a globe and zoom in, and that's a bathymetric map, but red is shallow and blue is deep, and we can zoom in to the debris field of Titanic. This is just south of Newfoundland, and we'll zoom in even further. So here we go, and the blue is optical data, and you'll see we can zoom right into the top of a boiler at Titanic. Very powerful technique. So we can have the global view and then zoom in on the local view. This is a plane that's underwater, plane wreck. And you can see by using photogrammetry and things like that, we can actually bring the plane into 3D and allow you to explore it yourself. And we're going to be applying things like this to Titanic and other environments around the ocean, in the ocean. Again, in the past, this would be a sort of a murky kind of image and maybe little bits of the plane all at once, but now we've got the whole plane. This is a whole volcanic underwater lava lake that has drained out. So bringing these things to the public and bringing these things to the scientists, most scientists haven't even seen this kind of thing yet. So scientific use sort of lags behind this kind of technology. Here we are at the surface. At Woods Hole, we're always developing, and other places, new technology. Robots, submarines, new cameras, learning how to put them together so that they bring a more holistic image back to the sub. And it's been exciting. I've been there 30 years at Woods Hole, and there hasn't been almost a week that's gone by where there's not some new technology that we can put into the ocean. Here we are inspecting the battleship Arizona. We've got very small robots that we can, that's a uniform hanging on a cloth. So we've got these very small robots that can penetrate into a shipwreck. So I'll leave you with the statement again, Marcel Proust. The true voyage of exploration is not so much in seeking new landscapes as in new eyes. And the point again there is that these technologies have given us new eyes on the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dave. I really appreciate that. Just as I'm beginning to announce our next panelist speaker, I just want to mention for those that may be able to do something about it, we don't have a clicker. Jesse Schell is going to be our next speaker. He is the CEO of Schell Games. Schell Games consists of over 100 incredible designers and developers out of Pittsburgh. He's also the Distinguished Professor of Entertainment Technology at Carnegie Mellon University. He's the author of The Art of Game Design, a book of lenses. He's a former Imagineer, so he's one of you. And he's also one heck of a juggler, so that makes him not one of me. So without further ado, I'd love to have Jesse come up and talk to you a little bit about games and how they can become part of this ocean story.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks very much. Hey, good morning, everybody. As Scott mentioned, I do a number of things. I teach at the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon. Some of you may have employed. Some of my interns are graduates there. But I also run a studio called Schell Games out of Pittsburgh. And we're an unusual interactive studio because we do everything from mobile games to virtual reality games to interactive toys to interactive theme park installations and interactive museum exhibits. So we have a lot of variety in what we do. And part of that variety is that some of what we do is all about entertainment, but some of it is about education. So we like to have that mix of different things. And to that end, we found ourselves doing enough things that are in the education space that we started developing some methods that we've found especially useful. And I wanted to share some of that today in case anyone else is thinking of creating experiences that are designed to be educational. So this is the model that we use, and you'll see we don't call it the educational game design model. We use the phrase transformational game design model. We like the phrase transformation because it reminds us that the goal here is to change the player, to change the guest, the person that you're engaging with. And also it opens things up beyond just education. If you want to make something that perhaps just changes somebody's habits, that's a change, but is it education? It's hard to say, but it's definitely a change. So the 3 steps are always this way. The thing everybody wants to do is they say, oh, we want to teach about this, so let's make a game that does that. And everybody just jumps to a solution. It's a very natural human thing to do. But we find it's much more useful to take a step back and say, all right, let's talk about exactly the change that we want to see in our guests. And then once we've really clearly defined and decided what the change is, then we say, all right, let's pick out activities that are likely to bring about that change. This isn't a game yet. These are just things that if you do them, it's likely to bring about that change. And then the 3rd step is, okay, now we know the activities, we know the change. Let's make a game structure that's going to encourage those activities. So a quick case study, that was a project that we did for SeaWorld. Surrounding a sea turtle exhibit that was originally in San Diego. Our sea turtle game ended up also being brought to Florida here as well. So in this case, step 1, describe the change. Well, as working with SeaWorld, we kind of came up with this list, and we said, well, we want people to learn and understand a number of things. We want them to understand that sea turtles migrate across the Pacific Ocean from Asia to the Americas. We want people to understand there's different kinds of sea turtles. We want them to understand that different sea turtles eat different kinds of things. We want them to understand the sorts of hazards that they face, and that the goal of the migration is to lay eggs. So that's a lot of things to kind of get across. So then you have a question, well, what's going to be the best way to do that? What are things that people could do that would help them absorb and integrate this information? Well, one of them is certainly just to see sea turtles in action. I mean, if you see them, you're going to start to understand them. And they're so engaging anyway that you're going to want to look at them more and more. To understand the things that sea turtles are trying to do, if you can go to the point of view of the sea turtle, it makes it way more real and way more memorable. We know some things are harder to remember, and so we want those things to be repeated. And also, given that this is a theme park setting, playing in a family group is what people want to do anyway. And of course, a family group has the advantage that it fosters discussion, and discussion leads to sort of better learning and integration. So then, of course, we had to design a game for this. So I'll show you about the game that we made. I'll give you a little guided tour of it. So this is a game that is designed for 4 simultaneous players in a kind of a public space. Initially, the one in San Diego is directly connected to the sea turtle exhibit, so people have already had experiences with real sea turtles, and now this is one more thing they can do so they can get this side of sea turtles as well. The experience is designed for 4 simultaneous players. The way one controls it is there's actually a physical sea turtle model that you pick up and tip and tilt, and then a sea turtle on the screen matches exactly what you are doing. And so this is what the players see on the screen. You'll see that there's 4 kinds of turtles there. So to get across the different types of turtles, each player gets to be a different turtle. And we introduce the idea of, okay, this is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be swimming 3,500 miles. I hope you're ready. We introduce the dangers that you're likely to face along the way. These are things that you should watch out for. And then we introduce the different foods that they eat. And so now everyone has an implicit goal. Your type of turtle is looking for this type of food. And so this just implicitly introduces these different ideas. And then the adventure begins. And so this is I'm not showing an animation of it here. We'll just do different screenshots. But this is an animated journey through the ocean. And you can see some of the hazards there. This is a part where they have to avoid the hooks. And there are other hazards as well. In terms of sort of fishing nets and things, but also when you're looking for food, and every time you get food, you get this little bonus in terms of how many eggs you're going to be able to lay when you get to the other side. Some of the hazards, of course, are natural hazards as well. And so that ends up being pretty exciting. And then when we get to the end, we make it to the beach, and there's a little celebration about it, this little sort of dancing moment. And it kind of asks the question, well, I wonder how many eggs you're going to lay. And so this is where we ended up having a light score moment here, where we finished the experience, which is about a 5-minute experience, showing here collectively, you as a group, you guys laid this many eggs. And for people who are competitive, we show the little, how many eggs each of you were able to lay. We also show the hazards and how many eggs were lost along the way due to these different hazards. So we found that this achieved a lot of the goals that we had. People were able to learn, understand, and remember this not through a lecture, not with a lot of text or dialogue, but just through kind of picking this up, interacting with it, having fun with their family, and talking about it. And then, of course, because it's got a little competitive aspect, many people want to do it again, and that repetition helps bring home some of these different messages. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here just to show you another exhibit that we did for SeaWorld, which shows how it's integrated. So this was a thing called Mission Deep Discovery, all about undersea exploration. And here's a little video to talk about it.
Our newest attraction, Mission Deep Discovery, which is an educational interactive experience where we're trying to help our guests discover the deep ocean. Here in our experience, we have up to 4 players that can come and learn about going into the depths. And there's very few people that have actually been down into the deep part of the ocean. In fact, it's our last frontier for exploration on our planet. Mission Deep Discovery is an extension of the Ocean Explorers realm, which we opened last year, and it ties into the Electric Eel, which is our brand new ride this year.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right.
Appreciate it. So we heard a little bit about some of the work and research and how that is being done in the ocean itself. We just heard how some of that work and research is transformed and brought into the park experience. But we're going to take a step to the side, if you will, with our next panelist, our next speaker, and think about why are we doing this in the first place? Why bother bringing nature into the lives of our guests in general? Whether it's SeaWorld or any other park, museum, science center, what's important about nature in our lives? And so I'd like to introduce Dr. Tierney Tees. She's a marine biologist, science educator, independent filmmaker, National Geographic explorer, and research associate at the California Academy of Sciences. She studies giant ocean sunfish, like everybody does that. So, she is the past director of the Sea Studios Foundation. She has authored numerous TED Ed lessons, also a TED speaker herself, and for my daughter, anyway, the thing she likes best about Tierney is that she's an Animal Jam daily explorer, and so she's engaging with kids every single day. So Tierney, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you all for being here. So now, as a biologist, I love this view of the ocean here. Is that showing here? Yeah, that's my happy place. But I think like many of people nowadays, this is more likely the place we're spending a lot of our time. As of 2008, we have now officially become an urban species. And in the United States alone, we spend 85% of the population is living in cities and suburbs as opposed to in the countryside. And this urban transition has been incredibly swift and relentless and doesn't show any signs of slowing down. We now, instead of foraging in the savannah, we forage along the aisles of grocery stores and, stock those shelves for our sustenance. And we spend upwards of 90% of our time indoors and 10 hours a day on average clicking on our computers, interacting with the world digitally. So this transition has led to lots of technological innovations and productivity, but it has come with trade-offs as well. I think some of these trade-offs are that we've become a little bit more intolerant, ignorant, and frightful of being in the natural world. Kind of summarized with this New Yorker cartoon, this New Yorker cover, where the dad is spraying pesticides to sterilize the natural world from his kids. It reminds me of Woody Allen saying, I love nature, I just don't want any of it getting on me. So, and at this same time that this is happening, we have some worrisome health trends. 1 out of 6 Americans now is on some sort of antidepressant, and this is costing the country billions of dollars in healthcare, work-related stress diseases and things like this. Perhaps becoming a little closer to nature could alleviate some of these ills. So how do we value nature? We know that it provides us these health benefits. As a conservation biologist, we can value it in terms of its ecosystem services. For instance, in the US, trees are pulling out 17 million pounds of air pollution. That leads to $7 billion worth of health benefits. Our pollinators are adding to our agricultural economy by pollinating our crops. The ocean is giving us, feeding 2 billion people, their major source of animal protein. Our forests and our mangroves are mitigating climate change. But what about some of the more intangible aspects of the natural world? Like, for instance, the awe of looking at beautiful scenery and being in the ocean or in the forest or in the mountains. How can we measure that, which perhaps is even more priceless than all the other ecosystem services combined? Well, one way we can do that is by looking at populations where nature has been taken away from them. And that's what we do with the population like our incarcerated. Since 2013, I've been working on a project called Nature Imagery in Prisons with my co-investigator, Nalini Nadkarni. And we've been, this is a picture of Snake River Correctional Institution, the largest solitary confinement facility in the Pacific Northwest. And this is where most of the inmates spend 23 hours a day, completely devoid of any natural world, no natural light, nothing. We came up with the idea of offering a small bit of nature imagery into their recreational yard that they could opt to look at and see for an hour every other day. And we did this in one part of the prison and not the other. And then after a year, looked to see what result this had. And we had some pretty significant findings that after a year, we found a 26% decrease in discipline referral rates. And in speaking with some of the inmates, one inmate, a notoriously violent, gang member, said, just having that small bit of nature, it changed me. It reminded me that there's still so much beauty in the world, and it brought him to tears. That reconnection with something bigger than himself. So this got a lot of attention and was named Time Magazine's top 25 inventions of 2014, and lots of prisons are now wanting to do this. And we're expanding this research into other prisons, looking to put in nature soundscapes as well as nature videos, and measuring the physiological responses of adding those back into a severely nature-deprived population. So measuring cortisol levels and things like this. So as a scientist and as a filmmaker, I'm really interested in in sort of drilling down into what is it in the natural world that's giving us these benefits. And if you're just looking at visuals, you know, what can we optimize those active ingredients to strengthen the experience? What is it in the brain that is triggered and that we're pulling on? To have these powerful feelings. Well, some interesting work coming out of UCLA is that when we process nature imagery, we pull it in through our occipital region back here into along what's called the ventral visual striatum. And along that, as we process beautiful imagery and make sense of it in our memories, along that pathway of processing, we see a density of mu opioid receptors. So when we look at beautiful imagery and we start to tie it into memories that we have, that's actually like having a little shot of morphine into our brains. Now, this is a good opioid addiction. This is something that, looking at the natural world, makes us feel deeply good in our brains. And that's just the visual aspects of it. There's so much more to the natural world than just visual aspects. We have sounds, and we have smells, and we have tastes, and we have aerial microbes that are affecting our microbiome. And there's a whole growing body of research about the effects of this. Like, for instance, evergreen forests release aromatic volatile compounds called phytoncides that boost our immune system. And people living near higher biodiversity areas have boast a greater, less allergic reactions and greater gamma proteobacteria that decrease inflammation. And being out in natural sunlight boosts your vitamin D, which elevates your serotonin levels and affects your mood. So there's all manner of different aspects of the natural world that are so critical to our health. But you don't have to take it from me, take it from this guy.
I spent a lot of time in these woods as a kid. But somewhere along the line, I forgot what was really important to me. Hi. Are you feeling tired, irritable, stressed out? Well, you might consider nature.
Are you suffering from an existential crisis? Prescription strength nature may help you. Clinical studies have shown that nature can save you from your neutered existence.
Being in nature can remind you that you have a body and that you're not the center of the universe.
If you care more about selfies than preserving the natural beauty and wonder of the environment, you may need to increase your dose of nature.
Nature's been shown to decrease thoughts of worthlessness and increase libido.
Tell your doctor if you are struggling with hygiene. You may need to decrease your dose of nature.
If you're obsessing about outdoor gear or find yourself co-opting an indigenous culture, you may be taking yourself too seriously.
Side effects may include getting off your ass, a genuine care for yourself, other people, and the world we live in, being more pleasant to be around, confidence, authenticity, and honesty.
I know you're busy, but don't fool yourself. You need nature.
So that pretty much sums up my main message. But what do we do with this information? Well, we can distill nature's elements and try to put them onto our desktop with our aromatherapy and our screensavers, or maybe it just makes more sense to go outside and take a walk. And what does this mean? And when we do that, we not only experience that multisensorial pharmacopoeia of the natural world, but we're also seeing natural processes at work. Like, for instance, the way nature, when it decays and creates waste products, that is providing food for the next generation, as opposed to the way that we produce waste. So what does this all mean for theme parks? Well, the biodiversity and the greens and blues, those elements that are designed into the parks, they have so much more of an effect than just pure aesthetics. They are a vital aspect of the mental sanity of your guests and your staff. And so conscientiously designing those elements in even just the interstitials are so critical. And when we take those away, we need to keep that in mind when we're paving over any green or blue parts. So that's that is a very strong design factor for keeping those elements deeply woven into the theme park experience. I'm excited to learn about some of the parks over in like near Disneyland Paris, where they have a whole eco resort right next to it with all sorts of functional ecosystems right next to the park, because they know how vital that is. So in closing, I would just like to reinforce that we have challenges ahead as we careen into a highly urban future, and that we need to figure out how to not leave nature's bounty behind. Nature provides us not only the raw materials for creating our parks and our technological experiences, but it's the raw material for our own creativity, our mental sanity, and just who we are as humans. We have the honor of being part of a 4 billion-year-old story, the greatest story the universe has ever known. And we're not made of binary code and silica. We are made of a code that connects us to the entire planet. So all you architects of dreamscapes and alchemists of the ultimate theme park experience, don't leave nature's bounty behind. Those experiences in the blues and greens are probably just as important as the thrill rides. So, thank you.
That was awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much, Tierney. That was, as expected, spectacular. And I'm just giving myself a little gold star for making, I'm pretty sure we have the only panel where we've been able to talk about undersea lakes, microbiome. So check, check. We're in good shape. So listen, before we turn to the panel, I want to take just a couple of minutes to share a technique that we use here at SeaWorld, Busch Gardens, Discovery Cove, as we're trying to think about how do we get from the scientific body of work and body of knowledge and distill that down and make it special and important for our guests in a theme park setting. And I think that's certainly applicable to anybody who's operating in a place where you're trying to tell stories about nature. But I think that the technique is also applicable beyond that. So we'll find out here in just a second. That's me. So here at SeaWorld, I work in this awesome setting where our task, right, like our marching orders, are to go out and create fun and create meaning. But as it turns out, creating meaning is not always simple. So we have tools that we use. And the one that I want to focus on today is something that can be sort of summed up with this line: from everything to one thing. So one thing, one what? What am I talking about? Is this one fact, one marketing image, one what? It's one idea, one key idea. So the scientific community knows all sorts of stuff and shares all sorts of stuff with us. So if around a given topic, we might have 1,000 different things that we can say. But within those 1,000 different things, there's probably one thing, one key fundamental transformative thing that we can bring into the lives of our guests, and that will be their way in to all the other 999 things that we might be able to share with them. The way that you might be able to think about this, and in fact, it's a bit of a cheat, is to reflect on city slickers. Anybody? City slickers? Few? By the way, we can see the generational divide right there, just as we put our arms up. But there's a character in that who's trying to talk about the meaning of life to another one of the characters, and he says it's about this one thing. So what's the one thing? Well, that's for you to figure out. But it is about one core, central, transformative, vital truth, and that's what we want to look to try and find around any subject. So I'm going to go through very quickly a couple of subjects or IPs that we might all be a little bit more familiar with, and try to prove to you that one thing is there at the core of any of these things. All right? So we'll start with this one, Now, I'm not going to comment on any of the different park executions that many of you may be wildly familiar with, but I just want to think about the source material, right? So reflect back on the source material, Harry Potter. What's the one thing? What's the core idea in all of those books? I would submit love is the most powerful magic, right? Love is the most powerful magic, more powerful than anything else. And if that's right, and you circle around that and stay focused on that in your executions, think about what that might mean. So, Avatar, another familiar IP to us. What's the one thing? What's the core idea, potentially, at the center of the story of Avatar? Again, I would submit this is a possibility. That the greatest treasure of all, is life, and all its diversity and all its wonder. We'll play one more time with a known IP. Lord of the Rings, okay? Possibly, the one thing at the core of it all is that true power is the ability to surrender, right? Possibly, you could argue this is as good a one thing. That belief is the greatest weapon of all. And so I'm not trying to say that there's only one thing, but I am trying to say that there's a pearl at the center of any of these IPs. And if we work at finding that and staying focused around that, we can deliver something really meaningful and really special to all of our guests, regardless of who we are. But who we are, we operate in a little bit different sort of IP space. We don't get to depend on authorship or directorship. Our author is Mother Nature. So we don't know for certain that there's going to be some sort of deep intention lying at the core of any of these properties, if you will. So I can't depend on that set of authorship. What I depend on, what my colleagues depend on, is the hard work of the scientists and researchers, like some of my esteemed colleagues here, to get out there and explore and discover and scratch away at things and gather and build that body of knowledge. And then, as we come to that body of knowledge and explore it and look at it, I've found time and time and time again that sure enough, that one thing is there. That fundamental truth, that transformative idea is there at the core. So let me show you a few examples from a different sort of world, our world. So when you're thinking about penguins, there are 18 different species of penguins. They're all found all over the world, but they all hold a couple of things in common. Number one is they've got a whole series of really fearsome predators that are after them, waiting to make them lunch. And number two, most all of them live in a place where the environmental conditions are really, really tough. I mean, think about a place where if we were outside, in the air, we're dead in seconds. If we were in the water, we're dead in minutes, and maybe minute. But they survive. They don't just survive, they thrive. And they do that because of the actions and dedication of mothers and fathers and the benefits that they receive from colonies and communities. So in their case, their one thing is that the strength of family can overcome the most difficult of challenges. For sharks, sharks are something that we all sort of innately, or many of us innately fear, and that's because we think they're going to eat us. And it's true that there's about 10 people every year that die due to shark attacks, but it's also true that there's over 100 million sharks that die every year due to our actions, human actions. That's unsustainable. And it means that you have shark populations crashing, all over the place. So our greatest fear should be their loss, not the other way around. Alternatively, right, there's not always just one thing. Did you know that there's over 450 different species of sharks? They range in size from the length of a cigar to the size of a school bus. Some of them eat lobster. Some of them eat squid. Some of them live in mangrove jungles. Some of them live down in the depths and they never see the light of the sun. Not every shark is a great white. Even great whites aren't great whites, at least as we see them portrayed on TV. Sea turtles. Jesse was speaking to the game that they helped us develop and bring into the park experience. And if nothing else, you might have seen there's a whole lot of threats that a sea turtle faces. I mean, from the time that it first hatches, just making it down the beach It's like Saving Private Ryan, man. I mean, they just, they get picked off left and right. It is tough being a turtle. If they were playing the game, at the end of it, they would have less than 0.5% of their overall season of eggs would make it there. So you'd see like 1-2 eggs at the end of a game. That's not an easy road to hoe. So every adult sea turtle that you see, it's a swimming winning lottery ticket. They're miraculous. My last example, bottlenose dolphins, dolphins in general. So one thing that you need to know about dolphins is that they are a deeply curious species. So that gets them out there exploring, turning things over, going places they haven't been before. Sometimes that gets them into trouble. Sometimes it gets them entangled in fishing line or crab trap rope or whatnot. But as often as not, it will lead them to, hey, that bay right over there, there's a great food resource. Or, hey, have you tried eating this? It's awesome. Hey, look at this. I can catch fish by putting a ring of mud around them and they're fish, so they're not as clever as we are, so they stay in the middle and we get to have a smorgasbord. So that curiosity is something that's deeply beneficial to them. Which leads me to my last, and in this case, second possibility of the one thing for bottlenose dolphins. And what I want to do with this one is just go into a little bit of detail in terms of the example itself. So I'm going to let this video play. Maybe. So watch the screens, don't watch me, because that's the amazing part. We had a little bottlenose dolphin, a 1-year-old named Calypso, a few years back, who started exhibiting this bubble ring behavior that you see happening here in front of you. It is awesome, awesome to watch. It's magical, right? And it is something that we were all just stunned at when it was first being seen in the pools. And we were stunned because we'd never seen it. And over, at that point, 45 plus years of caring for dolphins, getting a little camera time there, we'd never seen it. So I went to the scientific literature to see, well, how many other places have seen this? How many times has this been documented? As it turns out, just a handful of times. In fact, there's been more men on the surface of the moon than dolphins that have figured out how to do this with air and water, right? It's this really amazing, amazing thing. And Calypso is just this incredible, little creative girl. But the most amazing thing isn't the rings, and it's not Calypso, as amazing as they are. It goes back to that curiosity thing that I was talking about. Because there's one other thing you need to know about dolphins and dolphin society. The young dolphins, the kids, are the ones that generally have more free time. So they're the ones who get to be more curious. They get to explore more, discover more. And when they're out there discovering, they might find something that's really, really beneficial to the larger group, to the survival of the larger group. So dolphin society is set up so that they pay attention to their young, right? So the adults listen to the kids. None of the dolphins that you're seeing here in this video are Calypso. These are all her watershed. These are all the adult females. For what it's worth, the adult males paid no attention. None. None. But all adult females who watched Calypso, mimicked her, and picked up this behavior, and now continue to do it to this day, and have spread it to the next generation of dolphins, coming online. So that, my friends, is the one thing that I would submit to you, which is most important to know about dolphins, and I would say maybe most important to know about ourselves and to think about as we're thinking of what we design and what we deliver in our parks, and it's this. Every single kid, whether they have flukes or feet, have something absolutely vital to teach us. So think about that. Think about that. Think about how kids can be our guide in our design, our development, and in our values. If we do that in our parks, we're going to have a pretty awesome product. Now, there's no great segue out of that other than to say, speaking of awesome, I have my wonderful panel over here, and we do want to, I wanted to just ask them a few key questions since, we don't get gathered together on the stage every single day. So I'm going to transition into a little bit of discussion time. I don't know if I'm Maury Povich or Oprah.
Scott, can I break in 1 second?
Please.
Scott's talk was amazing. Can we hear it for him?
Yay!
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to do the same.
Jesse's trying to get per diem out of me, so. That was very nice. So I open this up for any one of you to respond to. And we heard this as one of the initial questions when Bettina was introducing the segment. Why study the ocean?
One of the things that we found is that humanity is dependent upon the sea. Our survival is dependent upon the sea. The oceans give us about half the oxygen we breathe, so every other breath of fresh air, thank the oceans. The food we eat, there's billions of people on the planet that rely upon the oceans for food. The water we drink, much of the water that we use, fresh water, comes through the ocean through evaporation and precipitation. So those three things, the air, the water, the food. And the thing is that the oceans are changing rapidly. And a big part of that's due to human interaction. So we need to find out what's going on quickly.
And to add to that, I mean, when we think about it, we are little temporary walking oceans. All the water in our eyes, in our blood, sweat, and tears was once in the ocean and will return to the ocean again. So, I mean, without a healthy ocean, we cannot have a healthy populace, too. So it's where we came from, and it's why we have life on the planet.
You know, I remember uncovering this little truth some time back, and I had to double check it and triple check it because I thought, my gosh, that seems impossible. But the biosphere, which is that's not you know, a Pauly Shore movie or whatever. It's thank you, try the veal. It's the living space on the planet, right? So it's the places where life might be found and is found. 99% of the biosphere, of the living space on the planet, is the ocean because of its size and scale. You know, it covers over 70% of the surface of the planet, but then it's three-dimensional, right? And so 99%. So think of all your travels, all the places you've seen, flying, you know, all the continents, everything. That's 1%. That's how big and important and vital the ocean is.
We've only explored about 10% somewhere inside there, so that we have that whole rest. Now, either there's nothing in there, because we found some amazing things, underwater mountains, underwater rivers, lakes, valleys, and all sorts of life that's just incredible. What's in that other 90%? Nothing or some amazing things? And we know, Tierney knows, that it's just full of excitement and important things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's amazing when you think that we're occupying just 1%, and look at the impact we're having on the planet by occupying just 1% of the living space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me transition to a little bit different question, but it's related, certainly. Why should we use a game to share a story, particularly an ocean story?
Well, I guess oceans and everything in nature is a kind of system, right, where things are connected to other things. And learning about any kind of system is almost always better through a game or a simulation, because other ways of learning are very linear, and systems, of course, are not, right? They're interconnected, and gameplay tends to really work well with systems because you have a chance to play around with, well, how does the system change if I do this? How does it change if I do this? And then further, games tend to be social, and then having not only, hey, I tried an experiment with this system and this happened and now everybody can talk about it. This is often the best way to learn and understand any kind of system, whether it be a living system or anything else. And then further, just the idea, you know, games as a way to sort of be playful with a thing is a way to better engage people's curiosity and really make them care and own what they learn about it.
You can test hypotheses, all your what ifs.
Right.
You know, and let those hypotheses die instead of the real thing.
I know the first time that I realized the true power of a game in telling an ocean story, or you know, bringing something complex and systematic, you know, into the guest experience. I was watching guests do Race to the Beach, and there was an exchange between a mother and son, and the mother said, wow, I never realized just how much like a jellyfish a plastic bag could look in the water, right? Because it's represented in the water. And the son said back to the mom, that's why we bring reusable bags to the grocery store. I was like, wow, that's fairly impressive. So,
Yeah.
let me go to you, Tierney, to at least start with. Everyone's welcome to chime in. But why bother sharing the story in the first place, right? Like, we know that the ocean's important, but how do we go about bringing it into the lives of the general public in a way that makes them care, that makes it relevant?
Well, story is such a strong vehicle. I mean, we're wired for story, and so we learn through those narrative through lines, and by sort of playing that out, then we can own it that way. Yeah. So, and that's, I mean, since time immemorial, that's how we've shared our experiences with the world, is through story, and that's how we learn. So I think that's really our only way forward.
I reflect quickly on the first time that I met Dave, or one of the first times that I met Dave, and we were having a conversation. He said, you know, it's really, really important that our two worlds come together, because we see, talking about the scientific community, we see so many amazing things. And some of them are just incredible and awe-inspiring, and some of them are sort of amazingly distressing. But they see it and study it. But as long as that just stays within the scientific circle, you can't ever change anything, and you can't ever incite wonder, you know, beyond that particular group. And so it's vital that the two worlds share with one another, you know, back and forth. So if you were asked, put on the spot, in your minds, what would be a candidate for what's the most important thing, what's the one thing that we might want to share about the ocean? Go ahead.
I think it's belonging, because, as Tierney said, the oceans are in us. You don't have to look. You know, at one point we began looking at the story of Atlantis, not because it's scientific, just because it was a great story, and we thought we could help find it. And I remember sitting with a person that was one of the prince of Greece. And he said, you're looking for Atlantis when Atlantis is all around you. And I take the oceans the same way, that it's all around us. And it's so mysterious and so shrouded in myth that it's something that we naturally want to explore, and we should.
Awesome.
Well, and I think, you know, we are quickly tearing out the pages of the Encyclopedia of Life as we take up more resources on this planet. And if you are an engineer, if you are a scientist, the natural world has been engineering and trying out different designs for 4 billion years. That's a lot of lab time. That's a lot of testing and iterating. And there are so many more secrets that are in the natural world that we haven't figured out with the systems. You know, the mountains being our water towers, the ocean being our cooling systems, the forests and the land being our carbon sink. We don't understand how these things work. It's taken 4 billion years to make them. So I think we have to study them so that we can figure out how to lessen our footprint, so that we can ensure our own longevity on this planet.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the ocean is where we all came from. I often think about when you see people go to the beach, some people swim, but many people just sit on the beach and just look. And I always wonder, what are we looking at? And I think we're like, oh, remember this? Like, we used to live in that. That was sort of, this is where we were. This is where, like, life came from. And so, like, the ocean is like the past of all life, but then in terms of as humanity is expanding, the ocean is an important part of our future as well, because if we can't learn how to live with it and work with it and integrate it into you know, our modern urban humanity, then we're going to be in real trouble. So
for sure. Yeah. Let me ask you guys one more question, and then maybe we can take a couple questions from the crowd in our remaining couple of minutes. But I want to ask you this. what role do you all see parks, zoos, aquariums, museums, science centers, all of it, the places in which we play and work? What role do you see them playing in the ocean story, in the larger global story? Are they important?
Well, I'd say they're absolutely vital. Absolutely vital. I mean, you guys are in the trenches of bringing the natural world and the wonders of the natural world to the public and educating them. And as parks, places like SeaWorld, Disneyland have a huge amount of real estate. That's a lot of biodiversity that can be shared with the world. And so I think, as I mentioned, we are careening into being totally urban and living in the built environment surrounded by asphalt. And the natural world is intrinsic to our mental sanity. So these are oases for connecting people to the life around them, where we came from, our bedrock. So I think they're absolutely vital. And the more we can think about pulling the natural world into these microcosms, the better off we're going to be for our future.
We did a very interesting project with the Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium about trying to figure out how can we use mobile devices to help people better connect to the animals at the zoo. And as we talked about it, we started getting to this understanding that was not a way I had ever thought of zoos before. We more and more found ourselves talking about each animal as an ambassador for their own species. And when that is a serious role, right? If that's the only contact anyone ever has with like that entire species, it's very important.
I think you're the portal to things like curiosity, inquisition, the stuff that we do. And to me, everything is about the experiential thing. And I see us both heading in the same direction. We want, as scientists, to allow you to experience the kind of things that we see, and you're heading that way too. But how do we make these things more and more experiential? So I think I don't look at you as separate from what we do, but as part of this arc from the bottom of the ocean to the public. Well, that's what I do.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right relationship, right? If we're all doing our jobs, that it's a continuum.
And I think we also, the work that I'm doing, I have multiple research working with neuroscientists now, that how we learn, it's not through intellectualizing and fact-finding, it's through the emotional connection and the stories and the ambassadors and anthropomorphizing, which was verboten for scientists, but now we're seeing just how powerful that is as a learning mechanism. So I think the experiences, the emotional tie with the music and the sound and the multisensorial aspects of theme parks are vital for educating.
This segment had the moniker over at Edutainment, which, full disclosure, I hate that term, but I love the idea behind it, which I think is what you're speaking to, which is essentially we want to feed the mind, we want to feed the heart, and that's going to create something really bigger and more powerful that will be of meaning, right, to all of our guests.
Yeah.
So I think we have just a few more minutes during which we can take some questions from the crowd, if you have any. If you want to know anything about the microbiome, right?
And the lights are up.
Hi, this is Kevin. Two questions for you. One is, how do you overcome, as professionals in educating people, the kind of forgetting curve, if you will, that people go through, especially with, as you mentioned, a lessening engagement with the natural world, so it's no longer at the top of mind and top of sight, and also increasing competition with media taking up people's time. And then my second question is somewhat related to that. How do you best scale experience from a destination like a theme park or like a or like a zoo or aquarium to something that resonates or can be done outside, so that people are constantly engaged and not on that sharp end of the forgetting curve?
So I might quickly try and respond to the first part of that question, but I think I've forgotten it. Sorry. I was about the forgetting curve for those of you. I think one of the ways that you get, one of the ways that you get past that true barrier, which is, look, you know, we're bombarded with stuff, information all day, every day, and so what sticks, what stays with us? There's two things, at least, that I would offer. One is to work really, really hard to get really, really simple, right? That's ultimately what that one thing is about, finding that core kernel of truth, and then sticking to that. That means you're not saying 1,000 things. You're saying something that's focused and true and resonant and transformative. And so it sticks. And deliver it in a way that feeds all of us, right? Because we are both a thinking animal and a feeling animal. And so if we are delivering it in a way that is resonant, emotionally, intellectually, that is truly meaningful, I think it will stay with you longer.
Yeah, I'd say my short answer is emotion. If you go into the brain, it's no coincidence that the emotional centers and the memory centers are right on top of each other. When you experience something emotional, you remember it much longer and much better. Mm-hmm. And so any time you can find a way to associate an intense emotion of any kind with something you're trying to get across, that's how you break out of all that forgetting curve stuff. Like all that forgetting curve research ties, like it is completely shortcutted around when you bring emotion into the picture.
And I think adding to that, I would say, you know, repetition, but adding novelty. So we're infovores. We love learning new things. We're always seeking novelty. So if you can have the same message, a very clear, simple message, but delivered in different ways, through gaming, through an experiential experience, you know, touching an animal, but it's the same message, but altered in its delivery system, then I think you're really going to get somewhere.
I've been involved in some monumental disasters where we thought, with the satellite link, you know, we've got the robot on the bottom looking at a Roman wreck. Let's have a cable to the ship, and then go from the ship to satellite back to shore, and there we'll have what we called telepresence, which was more television, and maybe even have a joystick so kids can drive around. So now, that to us was groundbreaking, because you normally can't get that image up until that time, a live image from the bottom. But you'd have to explain that to someone. You didn't realize we couldn't do this, but we can do it, and here it is. And the other thing was, you know, at the same time that we were getting this, you know, you'd have kids watching mud and all that stuff. I would go home, put on a headset, turn on my Xbox, and click, click, click. And now suddenly I've got a global community that I'm interacting with, sharing an experience. And I always saw the gap between what's really technically possible for a global audience and what we could offer as huge. Now, fortunately, we're catching up. You know, we're realizing that we don't understand as scientists all the problems that you have, all the challenges that you have. So we're doing our part. But in the past, we've had some real tough times going at it without having you to help us get there.
With very, very quick comment to scale, I'll just say this. If the comment was coming from the standpoint of, well, we can do it big in parks, so how in the world can we, you know, talk about nature big outside of the parks? The world's a lot bigger than the parks themselves. So we've got great opportunities in both locations. Another question? And if you wouldn't mind, yeah, just so I know where to look.
I had a little bit of a similar question to his. If you're designing an exhibit or a game that has an educational aspect to it, and you're competing with a ride or something else that does not have an educational aspect to it, how do you catch the guest's attention and get them to be interested in what you're doing? Like, for instance, right at the entrance to Infinity Falls is 2 educational game areas. How do you get a family to go over to the game and not just go straight to Infinity Falls, if that makes sense?
No, that makes sense. I'll just say this. As I reflect on our park experience, we try and not put those things in competition with one another. We try and make them complementary to one another. So in that particular instance, as you're coming in or out of the ride, or there are portions of your family who say, I don't feel like getting wet right now. So what might be available to me in this space? It's there as an option to sort of to dive deeper. If you reflect on the Mako Plaza that we all walked through last night as we were leaving the Sea Lion and Otter Show, there are several different educational pieces that are sort of integrated into the theming of that space. In fact, I brought Dave over, and when we were watching one of the park families, interact with one of those pieces. So they're never, ideally, right? You've developed something in concert with one another. In the Mako example, we did a coaster and educational elements at the same time. They were intended to reinforce one another.
Also, two key words: air conditioning. Right?
Yeah, right.
But it is important. Like, people at a theme park experience, other than teenagers, most people are not looking for an incredibly constantly intense experience all day long. They want to do some intense things and take a break, and intense things and take a break. And very often it's important to realize the social, like the social goals that people have going to theme parks. It's often a very intentional goal of the family. This is going to be a time where we're going to connect with each other a bit. And so having kind of quiet downtimes that can be maybe more about examining and exploring and learning something new can fit in to the day. It's not going to, if you put it head to head with a roller coaster, it's not going to win. But people are looking for a variety in their day. And if you can provide these different pieces of variety, people are going to go to them when the time is right.
With lots of biodiversity all
There you
around.
go. Right. But
Blue and green elements.
But that does mean the messaging is very important. If people go in thinking this is a thrill experience and it's not, no, this is more of an exploration experience, they can often be disappointed. But if you signal things clearly so they can go to what they want when they want it, then it can work out very well.
Ideally, natural social spaces, right? That are taken.
Yeah.
And I just have to say this really fast, because we heard about the importance of social experience several times yesterday, right? Even on a coaster, which I love coasters, the picture that you put on your wall, that's not my thing, that was another speaker yesterday who was showing, right, reminding us what is it that we collect. It's experiences and memories of those experiences. The picture that you buy and put on your wall of a coaster ride is likely not the one where it's just you in the front row. It's probably you and your friends and your family, because it's a shared memory or experience. That's ultimately what we're delivering, is not a day away from, particularly in our case, reality. We're trying to bring you closer to reality, but it's absolutely not a day away from your family and friends. It's a day with your family and friends. So those social opportunities, whether they're high thrill or of a different tenor, are super important, super valuable. Any other questions? I don't know who's...
I got a mic over here on your left. Hey.
There we go. Yeah.
Hey, as a fan of edutainment, we produce some of that. What's a wrong thing you can do in edutainment? What is like, no, you shouldn't have done that, or no, that was a bad thing to create for edutainment?
Yeah,
I got some answers, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, the key, the easiest mistake to make is pushing too much information for information's sake, coming at it from the teacher's perspective as opposed to the guest's perspective. That's the easiest mistake to make, definitely.
I would say, just qualify that the bad teacher's perspective, right?
Teachers.
Good teachers are great at delivering that. And I'd just expand on that for a hot second to say that it's not just about trying to say too much, right? That's coming down to that, find the thing that it's all about. But it's getting enticed or falling in love with a trick, right? A gimmick, a platform, before you've figured out what is it that I want to say? What is the meaningful thing that I want to bring forward? What is the transformation that I want to bring to our guests? Because if it goes the other way around, it's cart before the horse, and the trick ends up driving the message, and that never works.
And I think the most important thing is identifying what the values of your audience are and moving in from the values. The facts, you can't give the facts a fighting chance unless you understand deeply the values of the audience you're trying to teach.
Yes, that's a great point. I think we have time for one more.
Hi, I don't know if mine's a question as much as just a statement, and that is, Tierney, your commercial. I actually would love to see that. I would love to see the public see that, and if it means starting a GoFundMe page or something, I'll give money towards it, because I think that needs to be seen. Maybe even an SNL skit, I don't know, but it needs to be seen.
I love that idea of an SNL skit. I would love to have taken credit for having created that. That's RX Nature, and that's a nature awareness campaign that I love. I didn't create it, but there's actually a number of skits in rxnature.org. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. And I think they do have a donation page for that. But I love this idea of having SNL skits.
Yes, yeah.
I think comedy and humor are just go a long way for teaching.
We have one urgent question in the back. I can take it really fast.
So urgent. Very urgent. Thank you. So we've talked a lot about how the emotional connections and the shared experiences really help the experience resonate with us longer than just in the park. Do you believe that maybe a tangible item along with these games as a reward or something they can take with them could make that even more powerful?
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah, I mean, I'll give a big thumbs up to that. Well, there was one that we created for Children's Museum of Houston was this interesting sort of escape room spread over the whole museum, and each mission the kids would go on, you'd get a different gadget. In one case it was an ultraviolet light, in another case it's a magnifier, in another case it's a telescope. And so you would use these things as part of the experience, but then it was a toy that you got to take home and continue to I mean, I don't have to tell you guys about the importance of selling merchandise at parks, because people want to hold the experience in their hand later, right? That's an important thing to do. And when you can connect that with any kind of engaging educational experience, it's naturally strong.
Memories and mementos are a thing, right? Like, even if you're just going out to the beach, what invariably do you bring back from the beach? A sunburn, but also, right, shells or shark's teeth or whatever it is you might have found along the way. You go on a nature walk with a kid, guess what that kid's gonna do? They're gonna pick up a feather and a leaf and a stick and a rock and bring it back home. And it's a treasure for them. And not for nothing, reflecting on a moment, from earlier, we should pay attention to that and learn something.
And just don't forget, the word souvenir is French for memory.
Mm.
There might be an add-on to that, in that, we all are afflicted with affluenza now. We have too much stuff. And there's a project called the Blue Marble Project, where that my friend Jay Nichols started, and he gives blue marbles, which is what our planet looks like from space. And he says, it's a memento to remember the importance of the ocean, but with that memento comes a call to give that to someone else who's doing something for the ocean, to someone who you want to share your love of the ocean with. So perhaps with the thing that you take away, perhaps an encouragement to share that with, to take what you've taken and to give it to someone else. And so you're teaching it, you're taking it one step farther and giving what you've learned to the rest of the world.
And I really can't imagine a better way to wrap up our time than to really sit on that thought, right? Thinking about something that you're passionate about, that has impacted you. In our case, we're talking about the story of the ocean and how meaningful and important it is, and paying that forward, right? And sharing it with someone else so that they can share it with someone else and share that with someone else. And bear in mind that someone, that's not always you, right? That's delivering that. Sometimes it's the guests who are giving back to us too. So just think about those things. The last thing I'll say is this. I was trying to think about a closing thought, and opened up BBC this morning, and they had what was supposed to be a soft piece, and they were talking about making drinks This is, mixology. We're supposed to be talking about making drinks. And the comment, the headline comment there was from a bartender, and he said, even just a plain old gin and tonic, which is my drink, by the way, if we see one another later, even a plain old gin and tonic can become a cocktail, right? Elevated to the highest of drink attainment, if it's made with care. And if nothing else resonates with you, if you're like, I'm not a nature person, that's not our park, that's not what we do, just sit on that for a second. Because we're trying to talk about the care that we bring into telling the story of the ocean. You guys all care passionately and deeply about your own subjects, and you're bringing those into the lives of your guests powerfully every single day. That's why it's such an honor and a privilege for us to be here with you today. So thank you very much.